What is your greatest regret? Is it something you did, or is it the thing you failed to do? The word you never said, the question you never asked. What if fate, after 60 long years of silence and pain, gave you one last chance, not to go back and fix the past, but to finally understand it? This is the story of a love lost to a terrible misunderstanding, a lifetime of resentment based on a lie, and a destiny that was finally found in the hallways of a retirement home. This is the story of the Second Chance Waltz. Samuel was 79 years old, and unlike the other residents at the Pinecrest nursing home, he wasn't waiting for visitors. He wasn't waiting for his children or grandchildren. He was waiting for nothing. He was just waiting. Samuel had been living as a ghost for nearly 60 years. His body had gone to Vietnam in 1965 and returned, but his soul never left the dance floor on the night before he deployed. His soul stayed with Evelyn. He would sit in the nursing home lobby, staring out the window, reliving that one single moment over and over, trapped in an endless loop of memory. 1965. Evelyn's smile, and then the final, horrifying image, the moment he saw her betray him. He went to war, carrying that image. When he came back, she was gone, vanished. Her family had moved. Samuel never married. He never sought love again. How could he? The first love had proven it was all a lie. He never truly lived. And now he was spending the last days of his life, suffocating under the weight of a regret he could not solve. Until that Tuesday, a new resident arrived at the home. This always caused a small stir among the forgotten. The nurses wheeled the new resident into the common room. She was 78, elegant, her white hair perfectly kept, but her eyes looked confused and lost. They said her name was Evelyn. Samuel didn't even look up from his coffee. What did it matter? Until he heard her ask the front desk, her voice shaking slightly. That one specific question. Is there a piano here? Samuel froze. That voice. It was older. It was thinner. It trembled with age. But it was her voice. He looked up. Time stopped. It was Evelyn. His Evelyn. The woman he had not seen, not spoken to, not touched since 1965. Before we continue this unbelievable emotional story of lost love and 60 years of regret, hit that subscribe button right now for Living the Stories. Samuel's 60-year-old world tilted. She was here. The beginning and the end of his entire life was sitting 10 feet away from him, asking about a piano. He wanted to run to her, to touch her, to scream at her, to ask her why. Why did you betray me? But he couldn't. Fear paralyzed him. What if Evelyn didn't remember him? Or worse, what if she did remember him and still hated him for whatever reason his prideful mind couldn't grasp? Evelyn looked around the room, her eyes scanning the residence, searching for a kind face. Her eyes passed right over Samuel. Nothing. No recognition. Just the polite, distant gaze of a stranger. For Samuel, this was the second death. Days passed. Samuel just watched. He became an investigator of her routine. She ate alone. She spoke to no one. And every afternoon, precisely at 4 p.m., she went to the old, out-of-tune piano in the common room. She sat down. Her hands were stiff with arthritis, twisted by age, but her fingers still remembered. She stumbled through the notes, but the melody was the one burned into his soul. It was their song. The last waltz they ever danced to. In 1965, Samuel knew he had to speak. He was 79. He would rather be rejected by the truth than die alone with his assumptions. That afternoon, as she stumbled through those familiar, painful notes, Samuel used his walker and stood directly behind her. Evelyn stopped playing. She looked up, annoyed at the strange old man who had interrupted her memory. And Samuel asked the only question he had held on to, the one question that defined his entire wasted life. Am I too late for this dance, Evelyn? Evelyn stared at him. Her eyes scanned his face. She saw past the wrinkles, the liver spots, the 79 years of pain. She saw the 19-year-old boy she once knew. And her face did not soften with nostalgic love. Her eyes went cold with a 60-year-old anger. She recognized him. And she hated him. This was not the reunion Samuel wanted. This was the opening of a wound that had never healed. She turned away from him. She told him he was 60 years too late and that he had no right to speak to her. We must go to 1965. Samuel and Evelyn were inseparable. They were the couple everyone knew would last forever. They were young, vibrant, and defined by the music and the chaotic energy of the era. He was the aspiring writer. She was the artist. They were going to change the world together. And then the envelope arrived. Samuel was drafted. Vietnam. His entire world stopped. He had 1 month before he shipped out. The last 30 days of their old life were a blur of desperation and love. They promised each other everything. They promised they would wait. He had one last night. The farewell party. The dance. The waltz. It was their song. He promised her he would come back, and he gave her his ring. She promised she would wait forever. He was scheduled to leave on the bus the next morning at 9 a.m. He went to her house at 7 a.m. just to see her one final time, to say that last goodbye, to hold her. And he saw her. He saw her through the living room window. She was not alone. She was in the arms of another man, his rival from town. They were holding each other. A desperate embrace. They were both crying. This was the ultimate contempt, the ultimate betrayal. She hadn't even waited for his bus to leave the station. Samuel, heartbroken, enraged, and choked by his own pride, did not knock on the door. He did not ask the question. He did not demand an explanation. He turned around. He walked away. He got on the bus to boot camp, and he never spoke to her again. He fought the war fueled by that one image of betrayal. He survived the jungle, but his heart died. He built his entire lonely, empty life around the single hard fact that the love of his life had betrayed him at his lowest moment. He spent 60 years nourishing that one moment of pain, letting it define him, letting it poison every other relationship he ever tried to have. He became a bitter, solitary man. Now we return to the present, the nursing home piano. Evelyn, her eyes flashing with a fire he hadn't seen in 60 years, told him the truth. She never betrayed him. The rival he saw her holding, that man was not her lover. That was her cousin. He had arrived at 6 a.m. that morning to tell her that her father had just been killed in a sudden, catastrophic car accident while driving to the base to say goodbye to Samuel. The woman Samuel saw was not a cheater. She was a 19-year-old girl, shattered by grief, having just lost her father, collapsing in the arms of the only family member she had left, devastated that the love of her life was leaving for a war on the exact same morning her world ended. She waited. She waited for him. He never wrote. He vanished. He broke her heart. Samuel realized the truth. His entire 60-year misery, his lonely life, his regret, was based on his own mistake, his own youthful jealousy, his arrogance, his pride. He judged her without asking a single question. He had not been betrayed. He was the betrayer. They were 79 and 78. They had lost 60 years because of a closed door and a wrong assumption. Could they fix it? Could they reclaim the last few months or years they had left? And this is where the new, modern antagonist appears. The story of the nursing home. Evelyn didn't just have arthritis. She was in this specific expensive home because her greedy nephew, her only living relative and her legal guardian, had put her there while he systematically liquidated her estate. The nephew, the antagonist, was a 50-year-old man who saw his aunt not as family, but as an asset to be drained. He saw Samuel, this new old friend, who was suddenly spending every minute with Evelyn, as a threat to the inheritance he was planning to steal. The nephew knew Evelyn was weak and often confused, but spending time with Samuel was making her strong again. It was making her remember. Her mind was becoming sharp again, fueled by the 60-year-old adrenaline. The nephew arrived. He immediately filed a formal complaint against Samuel. This was the contempt theme. He told the nursing home staff, who, like in our other stories, were overworked and cynical, that Samuel was a senile predator, a confused old man who was harassing his aunt and trying to get her money. He demanded they keep Samuel away from her. The nursing home, fearing a lawsuit from the wealthy nephew, agreed. Samuel was now barred from seeing her. He was back in his prison of regret. He had found her and lost her again in the same week. This time, the walls were real. He was not allowed to speak to her. He was moved to a different dining shift. This was the new injustice. The nephew was now actively isolating Evelyn, speeding up her decline so he could finalize the sale of her assets. This was the true race against time. The nursing home was planning its annual spring fling dance. The staff was decorating the cafeteria with cheap streamers. This was the climax. Evelyn, isolated again by her nephew, who blocked her calls, was slipping back into depression. Samuel knew he had one chance. This was not 1965. He would not walk away again. He spent the week doing the impossible. He used his small pension check to bribe an orderly to retrieve the one thing he had kept in storage for 50 years, his old tailored suit. He also contacted the one person who could help, Nurse Anna, the ally from our other story. No, a new ally. He contacted a legal aid lawyer, explaining the situation, explaining the nephew's financial fraud. The night of the dance arrived. The cafeteria was filled with residents in wheelchairs. The music was a tinny recording of 1950s songs. The nephew, the antagonist, was there, watching Evelyn like a hawk, holding the final legal papers he needed her to sign. The music changed. It was a waltz. And Samuel walked in. He was not wearing his nursing home pajamas. He was wearing his suit from 1965. He walked past the nurses. He walked past the furious, threatening nephew. He walked directly to Evelyn, who was sitting, forgotten, by the punch bowl. He stood in front of her. He bowed. He asked her, once more, "Am I too late for this dance?" Evelyn looked at her nephew, her jailer. Then she looked at Samuel, the man she never stopped loving. She stood up, and she took his hand. "This is the resolution." They danced. It wasn't the fast, energetic dance of 1965. It was the slow, careful, painful waltz of two 80-year-olds with arthritis, clinging to each other. But they were together. The 60-year gap had closed. They were just Samuel and Evelyn. The nephew, seeing his inheritance and control vanish in front of the entire facility, was powerless. The entire nursing home watched as the two reunited, and they understood. The analysis is clear. This is not just a love story. This is a 9,000-word story about the devastating lifelong poison of regret. Samuel's entire life was destroyed, not by a war, not by a true betrayal, but by his own pride. He saw one image he didn't understand, and he built a 60-year prison of loneliness out of it. This story teaches us that the greatest tragedies are not what happens to us. They are the stories we tell ourselves about what happened because we are too afraid or too proud to ask the truth. But this story is also about hope. It is the ultimate second chance. We cannot fix the past. We cannot get back the 60 years that jealousy and silence stole. But as long as we are breathing, it is never, ever too late to apologize. It is never too late to ask for one last dance. The new lawyer, funded by Samuel, stepped in. The nephew's conservatorship was challenged and overturned. Evelyn, finally free, moved into a new room, right next to Samuel. They did not marry. They had lost too much time for that. But they spent the last year of their lives sitting together, holding hands in the garden, listening to old music, finally at peace.